Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'd like to thank the Australian Space Biology Symposium for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Simon Evetts. I emanate from Blue Abyss, from reaction dynamics, and I'm a visiting professor from Northumbria University. I'm a proponent of human spaceflight and have been for some decades, championing the field in the UK. And I'd like to use my field, and indeed space more broadly, to illustrate how space itself is an excellent crucible for innovation that can help life on Earth. I'm hugely excited by how the space sector has developed and progressed over the last decade or so, and where we're going. Human spaceflight is moving more and more into low Earth orbit, commercial activities growing, government activities looking at the moon, and in fact also commercial. We're looking at Lunar Gateway, we're looking at missions to the moon, potential habitats on the moon, and even thereafter, we're looking at Mars. Space is crazy dangerous. I think we all know that. Traveling to Mars will be really difficult and really dangerous. Living on Mars, once we get there, will be really difficult and really dangerous. And I want to use these facts, and therefore the concept of traveling to and spending time on Mars, to underpin what I want to talk to you about today. So this very danger and its associated stresses are problematic to the human body, whether we're looking at the physiological changes that occur in hypo or zero gravity, muscular atrophy, bone deconditioning, whether we're looking at space radiation. This could be acute effects from solar flares or chronic effects from galactic cosmic radiation. The distance itself from Earth means that we don't have the resources that we would normally have when we're on Earth or close to Earth. The environment is hostile, there's isolation, there's confinement. All of these things impact the human body and the human mind, and many of them negatively. So these things drive needs. There are needs for countermeasures to these dangers and to these risks. I'm going to use the field I'm most familiar with, space medicine, to illustrate the points that I'm going to be covering. So traveling through space, traveling to Mars, will drive needs. Today, astronauts, they undertake hours of countermeasures each day to combat the deleterious effects of long duration exposure to space. Anyone traveling to Mars and living on Mars will also need the right countermeasures. There's preventative healthcare measures that are required. We are aware of the problematic issues that are occurring with regards to vision in space. This requires countermeasures, and there will be others more associated with Mars itself that will need to be dealt with and prevented. There's the need for remote autonomous healthcare. Any individuals out on Mars, of course, are going to be relatively far away from any help. Even if they've got a crew surgeon relatively close, it will still be difficult for that individual to travel to them, or for them to travel to that individual. There's a need for individual autonomous healthcare capability and team autonomous healthcare capability on Mars. And there's a need for technological support. A good example would be robotic surgery, where there's the ability to conduct healthcare at a distance using technology. Space medicine requires and utilizes technology to a large degree, and there will be more and more of this technology developed and made available for human use as we get closer to traveling to and spending time on Mars. Human spaceflight imposes constraints, not just on the individual, but on equipment, on procedures, on how things are done. Extreme constraints. Equipment must have small mass, small volume, a small footprint. Consumables need to have long shelf lives so they don't have to keep getting replaced. Hardware must have lower power consumption because power is at a premium in space. Hardware should have low and simple maintenance requirements. We can't have, we don't want to have to keep replacing things because that takes resources and energy and cost. Procedures must be simple so that each procedure is able to be undertaken quickly. Time is valuable in space and efficiently. Hardware must be durable and robust. Again, we don't want to have to replace or repair. And really, this is the environment that has the most constraints that we could think of. It's one of the most restricted fields of endeavor that any human can pursue. And it is these very constraints that force us to innovate, to be able to solve the many difficulties and problems that I just alluded to. The coupling of need and constraint drives innovation. This is the key of the talk. Let's look at a couple of examples. The first is historical. Skylab, there were 3 Skylab missions in the 70s, and these were designed to specifically look at the human element of a space mission. How do we keep people healthy and happy in space? They had an in-flight medical support system that was there to look after the crew whilst they were there, but also to be able to conduct science. And within this, there was the capability to take blood samples. And a lot of blood samples were required for the amount of science that the missions wanted to pursue. At that time, really, you were looking at 60 ml blood samples for the sort of variables that were to be analysed. And they could not be returned immediately to Earth, so they needed to be stored. So that's a lot of blood that needed to be taken and also stored. And really, the need existed for the amount of that blood that was to be taken each time to be reduced significantly. So a scientific program was pursued, a significant R&D effort was pursued that ultimately led to the variables that were of interest being able to be acquired and captured within a 6 ml sample of blood. So a magnitude reduction in the quantity of blood to be taken each time. So on the ground, on Earth, the need and the constraints that were being experienced in space did not exist, so there wasn't as much drive for that innovation. But of course, terrestrial medicine gained significantly from that innovation, from the need in space. Over the years since then, we've really started to understand the adverse effects of deconditioning that we see as a result of spending time in space, in microgravity in particular. And this space deconditioning for certain tissues and systems is very much like aging. And indeed, the magnitude sometimes it referred to is 7 times faster aging for some tissues and systems. And so there are parallels with what we see on Earth in the aging population and in our increasingly sedentary population. So these next few slides I'm not going to go through in detail, but I'll use them to show you and to highlight that there's a massive multi-billion-dollar international research effort looking into deconditioning, looking into how to prevent bone deconditioning, for instance, looking into the issues with muscles and tendon deconditioning, what causes it, what's the etiology, how do we deal with it, with regard to postural instability, which is also an aspect of deconditioning we see in space as a result of time in space, and the likes of nutrition. What is the optimal nutrition to be able to maintain health and strength and 1G body standards, if you like? So this massive R&D program with scientists from many nations is being pursued to enable us to better live and work in space, but at the same time will translate to many of the aging and sedentary related issues that we see on Earth. What needs to happen, therefore, for us to be able to effectively live and work on Mars? Well, we need to better understand the etiology behind these conditions that I've just been referring to. We need to be able to establish more efficient countermeasures to the deconditioning and other effects we come across. We need contingency plans and mechanisms to minimize the risks that will be present on Mars. We need to be able to improve the ability of the individuals involved to retain their skill sets. Take us a doctor, for instance, traveling to Mars, a 3-year mission. That individual will need to be effective after 2.5 years in emergency, and therefore to have retained the skill sets through some form of technological practice in the meantime. We need to be able to develop effective remote healthcare methodologies and equipment, as I've touched on in previous slides, more optimal or more improved autonomous healthcare. And it's not just the physiological, it's also the psychological, the sociological, the cultural side of things. There are areas there that need to be dealt with in order for us to be able to effectively and successfully live and work on Mars. So if we're traveling to Mars, tomorrow's needs means that the R&D we conduct today must lead to innovation that we can use tomorrow. If we're to live and work on Mars, we need to be able to maintain these skill sets that we travel to Mars with. We need to be able to operate efficiently and safely. We need to be able to practice autonomous healthcare. We need to be resilient. We need to be able to access expansive databases of information. We need to be able to prevent deconditioning. So there's a great deal that the individuals in this during these missions will need to be able to do that today, even today, we are still finding difficult. Okay, space is tough, but that very reason means that we learn new ways to do things. So the products and the capabilities, the knowledge that we gain from our space activities, they translate directly to the needs of an aging and more sedentary society. We see preventative medicine emanating from our field, improved understanding of deconditioning and its prevention, the technology for remote healthcare and for autonomous healthcare. We see robust and resilient biotechnology coming from our field that will be able to be used in community healthcare on Earth. So this is a win-win. We must embrace these constraints because of the innovation that results, highlight that the space research that we pursue and the activities we pursue, they support terrestrial healthcare needs, and we should publicize and be proud of the fact that our attempts to move out towards the moon, towards Mars, they do not need to detract from our ability to solve issues on the planet. They actually help our ability to solve issues. Simply attempting to try to go to Mars will help life on Earth. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that was enjoyable and of interest, and I hope you have an excellent remainder of the symposium.